Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our reading of The Swiss Family Robinson. Today's chapter, The Salt Cavern. Let's get started. The winds at length were lulled. The sun shot his brilliant rays through the ribbon clouds. The rain ceased to fall. Spring had come. No prisoner set at liberty could have felt more joy than we did as we stepped forth from our winter abode, refreshed our eyes with the pleasant verdure around us, and our ears with the merry songs of a thousand happy birds, and drank in the pure balmy air of spring. Our plantations were thriving vigorously. The seed we had sown was shooting through the moist earth. All nature was refreshed. Our nest was our first care, filled with leaves and broken and torn by the wind. It looked indeed dilapidated. We worked hard, and in a few days it was again habitable. My wife begged that I would now start her with the flax, and as early as possible I built a drying oven, and then prepared it for her use. I also, after some trouble, manufactured a beetle reel and spinning wheel, and she and Franz were soon hard at work, the little boy reeling off the thread his mother spun. I was anxious to visit Tentholm, for I feared that much of our precious stores might have suffered. Fritz and I made an excursion thither. The damage done to Falconhurst was as nothing compared to the scene that awaited us. The tent was blown to the ground, the canvas torn to rags, the provisions soaked, and two casks of powder utterly destroyed. We immediately spread such things as we hoped yet to preserve in the sun to dry. The pinnace was safe, but our faithful tugboat was dashed in pieces, and the irreparable damage we had sustained made me resolve to contrive some safer and more stable winter quarters before the arrival of the next rainy season. Fritz proposed that we should hollow out a cave in the rock, and though the difficulties such an undertaking would present appeared almost insurmountable, I yet determined to make the attempt. We might not, I thought, hew out a cavern of sufficient size to serve as a room, but we might at least make a cellar for the more valuable and perishable of our stores. Some days afterward, we left Falconhurst with the cart laden with a cargo of spades, hammers, chisels, pickaxes, and crowbars, and began our undertaking. On the smooth face of the perpendicular rock, I drew out in chalk the size of the proposed entrance, and then, with minds bent on success, we battered away. 6 days of hard and incessant toil made but little impression. I do not think that the hole would have been a satisfactory shelter for even Master Nips. But we still did not despair, and were presently rewarded by coming to softer and more yielding substance. Our work progressed, and our minds were relieved. On the 10th day, as our persevering blows were falling heavily, Jack, who was working diligently with a hammer and crowbar, shouted, "Gone, Fowler! Fritz, my bar has gone through the mountain!" "Run around and get it," laughed Fritz. "Perhaps it has dropped into Europe. You must not lose a good crowbar." But really, it is true. It went right through the rock. I heard it crash down inside. Oh, do come and see, he shouted excitedly. We sprang to his side, and I thrust the handle of my hammer into the hole he spoke of. It met with no opposition. I could turn it in any direction I chose. Fritz handed me a long pole. I tried the depth with that. Nothing could I feel. A thin wall then was all that intervened between us and a great cavern. With a shout of joy, the boys battered vigorously at the rock. Piece by piece fell, and soon the hole was large enough for us to enter. I stepped near the aperture, and was about to make a further examination when a sudden rush of poisonous air turned me giddy, and shouting to my sons to stand off, I leaned against the rock. When I came to myself, I explained to them the danger of approaching any cavern or other place where the air has for a long time been stagnant. Unless the air is incessantly renewed, it becomes vitiated, I said, and fatal to those who breathe it. The safest way of restoring it to its original state is to subject it to the action of fire. A few handfuls of blazing hay thrown into this hole may, if the place is small, sufficiently purify the air within to allow us to enter without danger. We tried the experiment. The flame was extinguished the instant it entered. Though bundles of blazing grass were thrown in, no difference was made. I saw that we must apply some more efficacious remedy, and sent the boys for a chest of signal rockets we had brought from the wreck. We let fly some dozens of these fiery serpents, which went whizzing in and disappeared at apparently a vast distance from us. Some flew round like radiant meteors, lighted up the mighty circumference, and displayed, as by a magician's wand, a sparkling, glittering roof. They looked like avenging dragons, driving a foul, malignant fiend out of a beauteous palace. We waited for a little while after these experiments, and I then again threw in lighted hay. It burned clearly. The air was purified. Fritz and I enlarged the opening while Jack, springing on his buffalo, thundered away to Falconhurst to bear the great and astonishing news to his mother. Great must have been the effect of Jack's eloquence on those at home, for the timbers of the bridge were soon again resounding under the swift but heavy tramp of his steed, and he was quickly followed by the rest of our party in the cart. All were in the highest state of excitement. Jack had stowed in the cart all the candles he could find, and we now, lighting these, shouldered our arms and entered. I led the way, sounding the ground as I advanced with a long pole, that we might not fall unexpectedly into any great hole or chasm. Silently we marched, the mother, the boys, and even the dogs seeming overawed with the grandeur and beauty of the scene. We were in a grotto of diamonds, a vast cave of glittering crystal. The candles reflected on the walls a golden light, bright as the stars of heaven, while great crystal pillars rose from the floor like mighty trees, mingling their branches high above us and drooping in hundreds of stalactites, which sparkled and glittered with all the colors of the rainbow. The floor of this magnificent palace was formed of hard, dry sand, so dry that I saw at once that we might safely take up our abode therein, without the slightest fear of danger from damp. From the appearance of the brilliant crystals round about us, I suspected their nature. I tasted a piece. This was a cavern of rock salt. There was no doubt about it. Here was an unlimited supply of the best and purest salt. But one thing detracted from my entire satisfaction and delight. Large crystals lay scattered here and there, which, detached from the roof, had fallen to the ground. This, if apt to occur, would keep us in constant peril. I examined some of the masses and discovered that they had been all recently separated, and therefore concluded that the concussion of the air occasioned by the rockets had caused their fall. To satisfy ourselves, however, that there were no more pieces tottering above us, we discharged our guns from the entrance, and watched the effect. Nothing more fell. Our magnificent abode was safe. We returned to Falconhurst with minds full of wonder at our new discovery, and plans for turning it to the best possible advantage. Nothing was now talked of but the new house, how it should be arranged, how it should be fitted up. The safety and comfort of Falconhurst, which had at first seemed so great, now dwindled away, in our opinion, to nothing. It should be kept up, we decided, merely as a summer residence, while our cave should be formed into a winter house and impregnable castle. Our attention was now fully occupied with this new house. Light and air were to be admitted, so we hewed a row of windows in the rock wherein we fitted the window cases we had brought from the officers' cabins. We brought the door, too, from Falconhurst and fitted it in the aperture we had made. The opening in the trunk of the tree I determined to conceal with bark, as less likely to attract the notice of wild beasts or savages should they approach during our absence. The cave itself we divided into 4 parts. In front, a large compartment into which the door opened, subdivided into our sitting, eating, and sleeping apartments. The right-hand division containing our kitchen and workshop, and the left our stables. Behind all this, in the dark recesses of the cave, was our storehouse and powder magazine. Having already undergone one rainy season, we knew well its discomforts, and thought of many useful arrangements in the laying out of our dwelling. We did not intend to be again smoke-dried. We therefore contrived a properly built fireplace and chimney. Our stable arrangements, too, were better, and plenty of space was left in our workshop that we should not be hampered in even the most extensive operations. As we were one morning approaching Tentholm, we were attracted by a most curious phenomenon. The waters out at sea appeared agitated by some unseen movement, and as they heaved and boiled, their surface struck, by the beams of the morning sun, seemed illuminated by flashes of fire. Over the water, where this disturbance was taking place, hovered hundreds of birds, screaming loudly, which ever and anon would dart downward, some plunging beneath the water, some skimming the surface. Then again, they would rise and resume their harsh cries. The shining, sparkling mass then rolled onward and approached in a direct line our bay, followed by the feathered flock above. We hurried down to the shore to further examine the strange sight. I was convinced, as we approached, that it was a shoal or bank of herrings. No sooner did I give utterance to my conjecture than I was assailed by a host of questions concerning this herring bank, what it was, and what occasioned it. A herring bank, I said, is composed of an immense number of herrings, swimming together. I can scarcely express to you the huge size of this living bank, which extends over a great area many fathoms deep. It is followed by numbers of great ravenous fish, who devour quantities of the herrings, while above hover birds, as we have just seen, ready to pounce down on stragglers near the top. To escape these enemies, the shoal makes for the nearest shore, and seeks safety in those shallows where the large fish cannot follow. But here it meets with a third great enemy. It may escape from the fish and elude the vigilance of sharp-sighted birds, but from the ingenuity of man it can find no escape. In 1 year, millions of these fish are caught, and yet the roes of only a small number would be sufficient to supply as many fish again. Soon our fishery was in operation. Jack and Fritz stood in the water with baskets, and bailed out the fish as one bails water with a bucket, throwing them to us on the shore. As quickly as possible, we cleaned them, and placed them in casks with salt. First a layer of salt, and then a layer of herrings, and so on until we had ready many casks of pickled fish. As the barrels were filled, we closed them carefully, and rolled them away to the cool vaults at the back of our cave. Our good fortune, however, was not to end here. A day after, the herring fishery was over, and the shoal had left our bay, a great number of seals appeared. Attracted by the refuse of the herrings which we had thrown into the sea, though I feared they would not be suitable for our table, we yet secured a score or two for the sake of their skins and fat. The skins we drew carefully off for harness and clothing, and the fat we boiled down for oil, which we put aside in casks for tanning, soap making, and burning in lamps. These occupations interfered for some time with our work at Rock House, but as soon as possible we again returned to our labor with renewed vigor. I had noticed that the salt crystals had for their base a species of gypsum, which I knew might be made of great service to us in our building operations as plaster. As an experiment, I broke off some pieces, and after subjecting them to great heat, reduced them to powder. The plaster, thus formed with water, was smooth and white, and as I had then no particular use to which I might put it, I plastered over some of the herring casks, that I might be perfectly certain that all air was excluded. The remainder of the casks I left as they were, for I presently intended to preserve their contents by smoking. To do this, the boys and I built a small hut of reeds and branches, and then we strung our herrings on lines across the roof. On the floor, we lit a great fire of brushwood and moss, which threw out a dense smoke, curling in volumes round the fish, and they in a few days seemed perfectly cured. About a month after the appearance of the herrings, we were favoured by a visit from other shoals of fish. Jack espied them first and called to us that a lot of young rails were off the coast. We ran down and discovered the bay apparently swarming with great sturgeons, salmon, and trout, all making for the mouth of Jackal River, that they might ascend it and deposit their spawn among the stones. Jack was delighted at his discovery. "Here are proper fish," he exclaimed. "None of your poultry fry? How do you preserve these sorts of fish? Potted, salted, or smoked?" "Not so fast," said I. "Not so fast. Tell me how they are to be caught, and I will tell you how they are to be cooked." While I was still puzzling my brains as to how I should set to work, he returned with his fishing apparatus in hand, a bow and arrow and a ball of twine. At the arrowhead he had fastened a barbed spike, and had secured the arrow to the end of the string. Armed with this weapon, he advanced to the river's edge. His arrow flew from the bow, and to my surprise struck one of the largest fish in the side. "Help, Bowler, help!" he cried as the great fish darted off, carrying arrow and all with it. "Help, or he will pull me into the water!" I ran to his assistance, and together we struggled with the finny monster. He pulled tremendously and lashed the water around him. But we held the cord fast, and he had no chance of escape. Weaker and weaker grew his struggles, and at length, exhausted by his exertions and loss of blood, he allowed us to draw him ashore. He was a noble prize, and Fritz and Ernest, who came up just as we completed his capture, were quite envious of Jack's success. Not to be behindhand, they eagerly rushed off for weapons themselves. We were soon all in the water, Fritz with a harpoon, Ernest with a rod and line, and I myself armed like Neptune with an iron trident, or more properly speaking, perhaps, a pitchfork. Soon the shore was strewn with a goodly number of the finest fish. Monster after monster we drew to land. At length, Fritz, after harpooning a great sturgeon, full 8 feet long, could not get the fish ashore. We all went to his assistance, but our united efforts were unavailing. "The buffalo," proposed my wife, and off went Jack for Storm. Storm was harnessed to the harpoon rope, and soon the monstrous fish lay panting on the sand. We at length, when we had captured as many fish as we could possibly utilize, set about cleaning and preparing the flesh. Some we salted, some we dried like the herrings, some we treated like the tunny of the Mediterranean. We prepared them in oil. Fortunately, in this beautiful climate, little or no attention was necessary to the kitchen garden. The seeds sprang up and flourished without apparently the slightest regard for the time or season of the year. Peas, beans, wheat, barley, rye, and Indian corn seemed constantly ripe, while cucumbers, melons, and all sorts of other vegetables grew luxuriantly. The success of our garden at Tent Home encouraged me to hope that my experiment at Falconhurst had not failed, and one morning we started to visit the spot. As we passed by the field from which the potatoes had been dug, we found it covered with barley, wheat, rye, and peas in profusion. I turned to the muller in amazement. Where has this fine crop sprung from? Said I. From the earth, she replied, laughing. Where Franz and I sowed the seed I brought from the wreck. The ground was already tilled by you and the boys. All we had to do was to scatter the seed. I was delighted at the sight, and it augured well, I thought, for the success of my maize plantation. We hurried to the field. The crop had indeed grown well, and what was more, appeared to be duly appreciated. A tremendous flock of fellow thieves rose as we approached. Among them, Fritz espied a few ruffled grouse, and quick as thought, unhooding his eagle, he started him off in chase, then sprung on his onager and followed at full gallop. His noble bird marked out the finest grouse, and soaring high above it, stooped and bore his prey to the ground. Fritz was close at hand, and springing through the bushes, he saved the bird from death, hooded the eagle's eyes, and returned triumphantly. Jack had not stood idle, for slipping his pet fangs, he had started him among some crayons, who remained upon the field, and to my surprise, the jackal secured some dozen of the birds, bringing them faithfully to his master's feet. We then turned our steps toward Falconhurst, where we were refreshed by a most delicious drink the mother prepared for us. The stems of the young Indian corn, crushed, strained, and mixed with water, and the juice of the sugar cane. And that would be all for today. I'll see you all next time. See ya!